The next item on the agenda, we'll be hearing from Frank Brenner, who's the Director General of EUROCONTROL, and then the discussions on air security in conflict zones. Now, he deals with cooperation, air cooperation, and there are thousands of users of airspace every day that use this, and this gives a real-time image of air traffic in Europe at any given time. This is what Eurocontrol does. We need to know more in terms of information exchanges and risk evaluation, and that is happening in cooperation with other international bodies, such as the International Airline body. In terms of how the knowledge has been implemented, this is something we need to look at. Please keep silent. What's happened with the EU, exchange of information with the EU, and how to respond to crises. The European Parliament supports the European Single Sky, but because of the difficulties and resistance that it's up against, Europe has not been able to fully integrate in this sense. To conclude, the European Parliament defends the crucial role that Eurocontrol is playing in setting up the single European sky, making it safe and integrated. In order to prevent disasters in the future, we could better coordinate efforts between different actors, including neighbouring countries to the EU. You have the floor, Mr. Brenner.
Thank you, Mr. Permouy. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the Committee of Foreign Affairs today and give you an update of where are we in Eurocontrol in regard to the crucial question of security in the air and the already mentioned question of the conflict zones. I start with showing you a graph how the development of the middle class is changing and has been changing over the years. You see here on this slide how over the last years and also into the future the middle class is changing all over the world, while of course in the past the US, Japan, Europe were the ones that had the largest volume of middle class citizens in percentage for all over the world. We see areas in Asia, specifically India, China, ASEAN countries, rising rapidly with their population into the middle class area. And this has significant influence on Europe, especially when it comes to air travel and the traffic connectivity we are seeking. Of course, these changes and the rise of the middle class in Asia is in general no surprise to us, but it is reflecting in the prognosis of traffic streams in the future, and we can translate this middle class development one-to-one into traffic developments. This slide shows where in 2010 the traffic all over the world was. 16% of all travel over the world, measured in revenue passenger kilometers, was within Europe. Another 25% was between Europe and the rest of the world. This changes towards 2036, where the proportion within Europe has fallen from 16% to 11% of internal traffic. And this is not because the traffic in Europe is falling. To the contrary, the traffic in Europe is growing, but it is not growing as much as it is growing somewhere else in the world. And this is why, in percentage of the overall worldwide traffic, we lose out in Europe on percentage. Today in Europe we have in the Eurocontrol's 41 member states a volume of 10 million flights per year, and to 2036 we are growing to 14 to 15 million flights. So there is significant growth in Europe, but compared to the worldwide traffic, we don't grow as much. Of course, obvious growth areas are in Asia, again, ASEAN, India, China. This has implications, and these implications have safety consequences, but also consequences in our need for reach out from Europe to those countries. It is also an opportunity for European countries and their industry, as these fast-growing regions need the knowledge from those areas that have seen huge traffic growth in the past, and Europe is predestined to support these countries with technology which we develop together as Eurocontrol with the European Union in the Single European Sky Research and Development Programme. We see that the connectivity of Europe to Asia is also still very, very strong from today to the future, and even more growing in percentage, from 25% in 2010 to 29% in 2036. We see that there is interest of non-stop flights from China, Asia and India to Europe. We see that airlines order aircraft, also smaller aircraft that can do non-stop flights. So the big aircraft you normally travel with will still continue to go towards Asia in hub services, but we will see much more smaller aircraft that will do non-stop city connections of cities in China, for example, as they call them, secondary cities, that we in many cases don't even know the names of, but that are still multi-million cities. So there is a change and a development also in air traffic. This all over increases the number of flights, and increasing the number of flights, we need to exchange data in order to have predictability in Europe when are which volumes of traffic coming in the long term, but also at the day of the event. So Eurocontrol is reaching out beyond its EU 28 member states to the other non-EU Eurocontrol member states, which accumulates to 41. And beyond to the big growth areas. And the big growth areas are for us South America, which is Brazil, the point of contact for whole South America. Obviously, the United Arab Emirates, which is a huge hub operation being implemented, and of course also China and Asia, India, in order to get from these countries and their governments the needed data on connectivity between Europe and those countries. The International Civil Aviation Organization in Montreal calls this a global flow management system, which we contribute to significantly. Now, here you see the slide of Eurocontrol's membership. We are under an EU Eurocontrol treaty, fully committed to the implementation of the Single European Sky, but not only in the EU 28 states, but beyond the EU 28 states to the 41 Eurocontrol states, which reach up to Georgia and Armenia. This year we have concluded agreements with 2 new states. They are in another blue color here, which is the Kingdom of Morocco and the State of Israel. This follows the EU policy, the policy of reaching out to the neighbors through so-called Euro-Mediterranean agreements, which have in content the idea to open the aviation market of those 2 countries with the EU completely and have no limitations in access and traffic rights anymore. This is of interest to those 2 countries. Of course, it attracts a lot of additional traffic and tourism and thereby increases the economy. But it's of course also of interest to the European passengers, as it always goes along with lowering fares and offering better connectivity to such countries which are of interest to European travelers. Now, in order to cater for these additional traffic volumes we see with the Kingdom of Morocco and Israel currently happening, we exchange also with them data and have them now very close to the Eurocontrol family, letting them participate in all developments and Eurocontrol activities. This is insofar important as they have committed, like the other Eurocontrol non-EU member states, to fully implement Single European Sky, and with that we help that we have homogeneous, harmonious, uninterrupted traffic flow. And as the President already said, single European sky is not yet where it should be. We support that these non-EU states accept the single European sky and implement that as well in their national territory so that we have uninterrupted procedures. Now, with all that traffic growth and reach out, I come to the point of what is disrupting the traffic flows, and this is the question of the conflict zones. We have, since the disaster of Malaysian 17, set up in Europe a conflict zone repository that is being made available to all the airspace users, the European carriers, but of course also the carriers coming from outside to Europe, in preparation for their flight planning, showcasing them what the different nations say about dangers in different areas. That can be the nation itself, the territory that is addressed in the as a conflict zone, but it can also be other nations that want to publish intelligence information about another nation's territory. This is all reflected in this repository that is updated around the clock and insofar gives always the latest information to all air carriers and to all the passengers in the end in those aircraft. We feel that it should not at all be restricted to any kind of European carrier. It must be to all carriers because lots of European passengers also travel with non-European carriers. This is heavily used. It's a protected site for only those who have the need to know, meaning those that plan flight plans and, of course, the states, the EU, EASA have direct access to this restricted site where we commit that it is constantly updated and absolutely azure. This is appreciated, but it shows on the other side the problems we have in Europe with more and more warnings and danger areas around. And of course, observing them, and the airlines really observe them and route their flights around them, we create additional bottlenecks, especially in the connectivity to Asia, as we press huge traffic flows through remaining possibilities, whilst in the past we had opportunities to spread traffic much more widely, which now with the conflict zones depicted here is not that possible anymore. So these are new challenges in order to manage the traffic and even put further effort and need to connect to other parts of the world to make the traffic predictable. We do that as network manager, which is an institution where we have been mandated by the European Union to gather centrally all these information and act as an operational unit under the single European sky and fulfill the mandate and the regulation. This is the difference to EASA, which is a regulatory body that creates regulation and oversees the regulation. EASA is coming regularly to EUROCONTROL under EU legislation, overseeing our operation, the operation of such an operational repository, the operation of all the central network management operation done here in Hagen and in Paris. We have a major role to play in the crisis situation as network manager, acting as a central point, gathering and disseminating information. This can be very unspectacular crisis scenarios on a local level where there is a technical failure, but that can also be much more significant inputs, like, for example, we had seen during the crisis of Eyjafjallajökull, where huge parts of Europe suddenly were not usable as nobody knew how the ash concentration was. We also see that in cases of unfortunate terror attacks, as we have seen here in Brussels, where suddenly volumes of traffic that were already in the air had to be rerouted in Europe and brought to other airports for safe landing. Of course, when Brussels Airport did the immediate decision to close the airport to safeguard its territory and find out what actually all is happening. So these are immediate crisis scenarios where routings of traffic happen with the network manager and the national organization. We also exchange with these ideas of the future of huge traffic flows with Asia relevant and sensitive data on the ground. Eurocontrol has been asked by the EU and its member states to set up a ground-ground infrastructure, which we call a pan-European network, where all the relevant air traffic management data are routed on the ground. And of course, this we protect significantly with cybersecurity activities, like making sure that nobody breaks into that network, safeguarding if attacks happen, how to counter them and exchange those data with the relevant national but also international bodies, here namely the EU CERT. This, next slide please, this all over reflects the activities operationally Eurocontrol is entrusted with in order to first make sure that the flights in the air today are safe. That also has to do with our civil-military mission, using the airspace in a most flexible manner, allowing the military to train, but also allowing the military with priority in actual missions to fulfill their job, operating out of European bases. But that also has to do with making sure that the traffic growth, especially to the Asian countries, is possible in the future, and thereby helping these traffic flows and this additional traffic demand by exchanging the information in a very forward-looking manner when the aircraft are still on the ground at Asian cities, that we know exactly when they will take off and when they will enter European airspace. The network manager is undisputed in its success. We think we are, as an international organization, best placed also to continue after the current mandate, which goes until 2019, updating the current EU legislation, as when that was created, the network manager tasks were not yet to the extent defined as they are today, and by that further securing the European security and, of course, the economical interests in the outreach to the other parts of the world. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Brenner. Ahora...
Thank you very much, Mr. Brenner. Let's now hear from members if they have any questions. Mr. Gahler, please, firstly.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Brenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brenner, for that very interesting overview and the challenges that we're up against, particularly looking at conflict zones that are around us and that have a direct impact on flight routes and capacity as well that we can get through those areas. Now, something that I've seen in southern Africa, having gone around Libya, now it's now west of Tunisia over Algeria. At any rate, that's safe. And Niger, Chad, everything's okay, so you can overfly there now as well. My question is to do with the fact that you talked about countries outside the EU who've got as Eurocontrol members, Caucasus, Morocco. Are we working with Algeria, Tunisia and Egypt at the moment in terms of negotiating things there and having a geographical offer from Libya, although obviously it's not a functioning state at the moment, but is anything in the pipeline there? What impact would that have on data exchange? If you think of Israel, for example, they are very well equipped. They're very professional about this. They have a lot of intelligence there, and they could help us out in terms of early warning of dangerous situations. But then with countries such as Morocco, who we do have links with already, in the future, the same could be true of Tunisia, they're more reliant on us. So is there an agreement possible there in terms of supplying security-relevant data? Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Gahler.
Thank you, Mr. Gahler. Mr. Tannock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eurocontrol, although it's confusing for many on the outside, is not part of it's not an EU body and has more member states than the current 28 of the European Union. Will the Brexit decision in my country require any UK-specific changes or negotiations, or will the membership by the United Kingdom of Eurocontrol be unaffected by its leaving the EU and be able to carry on as a full member without having to make any specific changes or accommodations?
El colega López Istúriz.
López Asturiz, please.
First of all, thank you for coming, and it's not every day that we have the Director of Eurocontrol. I would like to take the opportunity to, as a regular user like many of my colleagues, we are aware of the hundreds of people that they work daily to have our safe flights, and I think that us more than many people will live this daily. Thank you for that. I will make not an exception but a point of skepticism about the controllers in France with their usual chantage that we suffer every Christmas and every summer. But okay, I mean, I know it's not about you. Second, and you spoke about the conflict zones, about these maps that are given to the experts for the flight plans. My question that I throw is, shouldn't be the users also be informed if they're going to take a flight, if there is any risk, so they can choose maybe to take that flight or not? 90% of the users of that flight of Malaysian Airlines did not know probably that they were crossing a danger zone. So I can understand the security measures, that this is not public information, but it's just I'm making myself the question. Shouldn't be information for the users if they're going to go through these kind of conflict areas? Thank you.
Mr. Pertel.
Gracias. Mr. Brenner, I'm pleased by this exchange of views with you, not only as an MEP, but I would say, first of all, as a passenger, but also as a private pilot. And I think that the single EU sky is a great idea, is one of the major projects which has not been that known and promoted as some other projects, but it's very important for the future of the European Union, not only as far as safety is concerned. And I think that this project, Single European Sky, demands a very strategic approach in order to be successful and lasting. And I think that several EU sectorial strategies should and can meet in an integral, comprehensive strategy with strong accent on environment and safety, of course. I have two questions for you. First, I would like to hear some visionary comments, or your comment, how will European single sky look like in 10 years? What do you foresee in 10 years? And my second question, as a passenger in Strasbourg, you know that now we have flight since 2 years, I think, but we are facing problems because of the incompatibility of two systems. Those who travel from Strasbourg know that, and can you help us a little bit in that to make more compatible Lufthansa and Air France systems? Thank you.
Y ahora le voy a dar la palabra al último.
Another last speaker, Mr. Peters.
Ευχαριστώ κύριε Πρόεδρε. Θέλω και εγώ να ευχαριστήσω τον κύριο Μπρένερ που μας είπε.
Thank you. I would also like to thank you for all these comments that have been made and have been put simply for us to be able to understand how Eurocontrol works. I have a few questions on safety, and I would like to know whether there are synergies between the different organisations. I would also like to ask how it is possible in a conflict region, how passenger safety can be called into question when they fly over these areas.
So you've got some time for the answers, Mr. Brenner, now, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you so much for these questions. I'll try to address them in the order as they have been put forward. Mr. Gahler referred to the reroutings around conflict zones, and it's obvious that the repository works because the repository and the slide I have shown shows that Libya is at the moment not necessarily the safest place to fly over, and that is the advice given by many states, and this is taken into absolute consideration by the airlines. We monitor as Eurocontrol all flight paths and see who is flying where, and on that basis we also check, are these things taken into consideration, or should it not be taken into consideration? We advise the airline that there are these advices out, and we can say that the airlines follow strictly those advices and don't take any risks, and this is why, for example, a South African flight now of course has to go much longer going around the conflict zone than to the very western part Africa. Now, on the data exchange with different countries, yes, this is a very sensitive question, and one will go in steps. So, for example, with the Kingdom of Morocco, we have, after the signature of the agreement, the comprehensive agreement, agreed to come with an audit team first to see where is the Kingdom of Morocco with their ANSP, their oversight authority at the moment in relationship to the standards that are applied in the European Union and the single European sky, and we draft on that basis at the moment with these authorities an action plan, which kind of support is needed in order to move the standards to the single European sky level. That we do in very close cooperation, and of course we look at the systems they are using, and the good news is that they are opening the doors under these agreements to the EU, which is the Euromed agreement on a political level, and to us on a technical level under this Eurocontrol agreement following the EU agreement. On that basis, we are very happy to see how developments are moving forward, and more single European sky levels of safety and ideas are taken on board. And of course, on that basis, also the data exchange will come on a stepwise approach. We start with very small data and will increase up to live radar data at a later stage once also the technical systems are in place and the security measures are there. Of course, data exchange is made on a need-to-know basis, so all traffic going to Morocco will then be made available to Morocco, but traffic not going to Morocco will not be made available under such an agreement. And this is a quid pro quo also in the other direction. When from Morocco somebody goes southbound, it's not necessarily in the EU interest, but it is, of course, in the interest if they come towards the European airspace, and that is how it's set up. Now, Israel is, of course, on a very high, sophisticated level. They have more the question, and that's why they want to participate very closely in Eurocontrol on the capacity question. Especially, they have one big airport, Tel Aviv, which is very much environmentally restricted, but it's also politically restricted due to the only accessibility to the Mediterranean and not to other directions. And that means that we need to orchestrate the traffic flows in a very intelligent manner to have them safely going into Israel and out of Israel. The second question that was put is the impact of the Brexit to Eurocontrol and the British. Now, the United Kingdom was in the past always a big supporter of Eurocontrol, Eurocontrol being founded in 1961. My predecessor was British. That shows already the huge interest the United Kingdom always has had in Eurocontrol. We do not, as Eurocontrol, see any change in policy of the United Kingdom towards Eurocontrol, as the Brexit vote, to our understanding, not at all tackles other international organizations. So the discussion with my colleagues in the United Kingdom held so far shows the full enthusiasm and the full interest to be continued in this international coordination in Eurocontrol in order to safeguard also the ideas of further single European sky developments also in the United Kingdom, as other non-EU states do the very same. Of course, within Eurocontrol, as we have 28 EU and then 13 non-EU states, of course, that shift is changing with the Brexit decision once implemented. But in the interest of the United Kingdom towards Eurocontrol, we cannot see any change, rather continued strong interest and support. On the question of strikes, that is a really bothering issue. Of course, it is not for the European Union to get in labour law questions, nor at all is it for us in Eurocontrol, but we look at impacts of strikes, and 3-4 strike days we have seen in France, as this country was mentioned this year, already amounts to a volume of 1 million minutes delays for air travellers. And that does not even take into consideration the huge volume of flights that had to be cancelled. So this is only the flights that actually took place. So it's a huge economic impact. It's huge volumes of passengers stranded. And we have put the question, together with the European Commission, forward, shouldn't there be some harmonization in agreements of minimum services still to be provided, even if there is a strike action? Now, there is national legislation. A few countries have minimum service agreements, other countries don't have it, and none of those agreements fits together. So with DG Move, we work on a proposal assessing the situation and how could a legislative idea look like that the EU 28 member states adopt to put a minimum service harmonized proposal in place into the future. That, we think, is the minimum. We don't want to touch the right of strike at all. But it cannot be that the impact is such and completely diverse, depending on which country we talk about, as it's nationally organized and not harmonized. The target set by the European Union on punctuality are already, through 3-4 strike days in Europe, not achievable anymore. So the 1 million minute delay means we cannot even achieve the target anymore. And we are at the moment already in 16 above the target, which was set for 0.5 minutes per flight of these 10 million flights I mentioned in 80 air traffic flow management delay. And so it shows what a huge impact that has. The second part of the question was, should passengers know on routings in the air? I think passengers should know that such a repository is available and all airlines make use of it to comfort them, that we as Europe, as the world, as ICAO has pushed that, have learned out of the disaster. So that is the minimum we need to first of all make sure. Otherwise, we would not do our duty here correctly. Whether it helps a passenger knowing the routing, I doubt, because routings change even when the aircraft is airborne, due to restrictions that appear, weather situations that change. If you look at a 9, 10, 11-hour flight, the situation develops. And then I'm not sure that it really helps if the passenger sees it in the air. He anyhow sees where the aircraft is going, because I think in the meantime 90% of all aircraft show the flight routing and make it known to the passenger in the air. But I'm not sure whether it will comfort passengers or whether in the end it will more discomfort passengers that they have that additional task to check. So at the moment we make all these information available to the airspace users and to the states. And we think at the moment this is a very solid process. Should there be the request to change that and make it open also to passengers and public, of course one can consider, but then you have of course the security argument on the other side, because then also other people can look at that which one perhaps doesn't want to achieve. So this is where we are in that thinking. On the question of the strategic approach, single European sky, and how do we move forward? Now, we have targets in the environment, in the single European sky, and I start with the environmental target. We are all meeting the states, all international organizations at ICAO at the assembly in 2 weeks from now, and we will discuss there the decarbonization and having air traffic growth from 2020 onwards without CO2 additional emissions. So, of course, these targets need to be fulfilled, and that needs to become also for the future single European sky legislation a very important part. The aviation strategy of Mrs. Bulc, as presented, covers a lot of those areas, which we fully support. It's the reach out to other parts of the world. It's taking into consideration the environment. But I think more legislation, further refined legislation in single European sky is necessary. We look at the third reference period from 2019 onwards, and we have developed white papers of what should be improved on the basis of the lessons learned to be taken into consideration. On the question Eurocontrol to understand, I'll invite all members of the Parliament. It's only a small hop from here to Haren. Please pay a visit to Eurocontrol. We are more than happy to show our operations room where all these kind of data are gathered and where we want to showcase how we deal with it. Compatibility, last question, of technologies. Single European Sky has the task and has the mandate to develop technologies that are compatible, and even to an extent that perhaps not all of them need to be built up on a pure national level. It's moving, but it's moving slowly. That has to do with investment plans, that has to do with write-off plans. ATM equipment is in general quite expensive, and one writes it off over periods of 20 years, 25 years in many cases, and that of course doesn't make the change of equipment happen very quickly. But we see technologies coming out of CESAR that, and there I think as Europeans we can be very proud of, nobody else in the world has, and I'm talking about technologies which are very much data-driven, like a remote tower technology, very future-oriented, and I think that will help Europe also selling those technologies, but also, of course, in order to sell them, first implement them here in Europe for a harmonious traffic flow. Sorry, I forgot one point. I was too fast saying it's the last one. The cooperation with other European bodies. So we have a high-level agreement with the European Union that describes our cooperation as being an operational technical organization. We cooperate closely with EASA. However, we think also in the EASA recast one needs to concentrate on the roles, EASA being the oversight regulatory body for aviation and safety, and they oversee us as pan-European operator, Eurocontrol being for the 41 states and with those partners an operational organization. Ideas to expand Eurocontrol to regulation have been stopped, and we don't do that. And ideas to expand EASA into operation, from our point of view, also shouldn't be supported, to keep the idea of the single European sky of separation of regulation and operation in place. But on that basis, the cooperation is very fruitful and intense, as EASA checks whether we fulfill all the CES mandates also as part of Network Manager.
Con esto cerramos este punto.
Thank you very much. So we'll close today's agenda point on that. I want to thank Mr. Brenner for the explanations.
Las preguntas. Muchas gracias.
And also for answering the questions. Thank you very much.